I never expected to be an old man with AIDS. At 26, I thought I would never live to see 30.
I was diagnosed with lupus nephritis when I was 19. Taking medication is saving my life.
Raising kids with chronic illness is very difficult. Medicine is our survival.
Having a child with Down syndrome, my goal as his father is to help him live the most fulfilling life.
There's a conversation happening in Washington right now, and I just hope that when politicians are debating about this, that they remember patients like me.
Politicians talk a lot about cost cutting. And I don't think that they drill down and ask at what cost.
Insurance is great until you actually need to use them. Walk a day in my shoes and live our lives, and then you tell me that I can't have the med that would make my kid better.
People with Down syndrome are susceptible to numerous chronic illnesses and diseases, Alzheimer's being one of them. As a father, I'm just not willing to sacrifice the one treatment that could help my son.
There are more families out there like ours. Things need change.
This isn't a left or right issue. It's a human issue.
This year's Maryland Life Sciences Bio-Innovation Conference is sponsored by Kite. Kite is a global biopharmaceutical company that is part of Gilead Sciences. Kite is based in Santa Monica, California, and has commercial manufacturing operations in North America and Europe. Kite's singular focus is cell therapy to treat and potentially cure cancer. As the cell therapy leader, Kite has more approved CAR-T indications to help more patients than any other company. MaxCyte. MaxCyte is an emerging global leader and trusted partner in the biotherapeutic, cell, and gene therapy industries. Headquartered in Gaithersburg, Maryland, we're proud to have supported the local life sciences community for over 2 decades. Our flow electroporation technology and next-generation expert platform helps accelerate, streamline, and improve drug development from research to commercialization. Now listed on NASDAQ with an IPO in July 2021, MaxCyte is attracting new investments to continue its commitment to enable and accelerate therapeutic programs. And Novavax. Novavax is proud to sponsor the 2021 Maryland Life Sciences Bio-Innovation Conference. At Novavax, we are relentlessly committed to one goal: developing vaccines against the world's most urgent infectious disease threats. Our team of experts is working in partnership with leading organizations from around the globe to advance our pipeline, including our COVID-19 and seasonal influenza vaccine candidates. For more information about our efforts to combat the pandemic and to see our latest career opportunities, please visit Novavax.com. We'd like to thank these and all of our sponsors for their support of this year's Maryland Life Sciences Bio-Innovation Conference. This panel discussion will focus on the pros and cons of outsourcing biomanufacturing. Please welcome your moderator, Ben Skowronski.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well here. I wanted to start off by just saying that was a wonderful fireside chat that we just got to listen to. and hopefully we'll be hearing a little bit more about Kite here as part of our panel as well. But first and foremost, I'm Ben Skowronski. I'll be moderating this panel today, and I wanted to introduce my colleagues here, and we'll start with you, Craig.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me. Craig Malzahn. I'm at Regenexx Bio. I run the technical operations team there, so that's process development, manufacturing, supply chain engineering. Prior to joining Regenexx Bio, I was with GSK, actually head of site here in Rockville, close by, running their large-scale manufacturing facility for monoclonal antibody production. So really now excited to be in the gene therapy space and bringing these new therapies to patients.
Hey everyone, Harish Santhanum. I'm the site MSAT head for Kite, which is in Frederick, Maryland. I joined Kite in June of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. Prior to that, I was the MSAT head for Merck, and in their biomanufacturing area. I spent about 2.5 years at Merck, starting up their cell culture facility for Keytruda. And prior to that, I was with Eli Lilly for 14 years, 12 years in Indianapolis, and the last 2 years in Cork, Ireland, setting up their biomanufacturing facilities as well. So about 20 plus years in the biomanufacturing industry, and the last 1.5 years in cell therapy.
All right. Hey, I'm Tom VanCott. I'm with Catalent, Cell and Gene Therapy. I never expected necessarily to be in the Washington, D.C. region all my career. I was in the U.S. Army and was stationed at Walter Reed, and that kind of began my career in biologics. I worked at Walter Reed developing vaccines for a while, then I moved on to a smaller CDMO, ABL, and now I'm with Catalent, Cell and Gene Therapy. I am the VP head of what we call product development, which runs our process development, our analytical development, and our MSAT group, and any of our internal R&D, innovative projects. So it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to a great session hosted by Ben, who's done a great job putting this together.
Thanks, Tom. And again, just to set the table here for this group, we recognize it's late in the afternoon. People have been here all day listening to lots of interesting things, but we decided we really want to keep this as an open dialogue and discussion. So we're not going to do a Q&A at the end. We're just asking that as folks have questions as we're going here, please feel free to step up to the microphone. But to really kick things off here, just looking at where we're at today in this biohealth capital region and where we're at as a whole. I mean, I think a lot of us look back 2 years ago and the industry was going gangbusters with cell and gene therapy, and that was before, what we're all referring to now as pre-COVID. And then obviously we end up with the pandemic, and we all know where we're at today. But a lot of this plays into the decisions that companies make when it comes to partnering with key partner firms like CMOs that are out there, or whether they keep that in-house. And that's what we want to kind of get through today in our discussions. And so to start things off, I think most of you know there's over 500 biotechs in this region. Now, a lot of those are small and emerging companies, but that tends to be the trend across the whole industry as far as more and more large molecule companies, more and more cell and gene therapy companies that have a lot of complexities to them that when choosing these partners becomes very important. So to start things off here, Craig, I just wanted to see if maybe you could, as with Regenexx Bio, a homegrown company, if you will, walk us through your journey of how you started, the partners that you utilized, how you selected and investigated those partners, and kind of where you're at today and where you're going.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. So maybe I'll start with just a little bit of background on Regenexx Bio. We're an AAV gene therapy company. We're now over 300 employees, just moved into our new headquarters, so that's really exciting. Company's been around for more than 10 years now. We initially, for the first really 5 years of the company, focused on licensing our NAV technology for AAV vectors. And then around 2015, we decided, we need to start moving these programs through drug development ourselves. And at that point in time, we of course, had limited resources, limited capabilities, and we took the route that most small companies do, and we went out there and started looking for GMP manufacturing partners. We had already started building up internal capability for process development, but needed to leverage some of that capability as well. And over the years, we've actually worked with a number of different CMOs, and honestly, yeah, sometimes it's gone really well, and sometimes it's been quite challenging. When we think about, who we're going to partner with, some obvious things for us, and probably for most of us, that are really important. You got to see eye to eye on quality and what your expectations are around quality. Obviously, you got to have the expertise there at the CMO, the capacity, the capability that fits, what we want to do. And you got to have the general business terms that sort of make sense for where the companies are. But in our instance, we also needed to find partners that would sort of grow up with us. They would build capabilities along with us in how to make these viral vectors and gene therapies. And the relationships that have worked best for us, it's been that sort of trusting partnership that we've been able to create with those CMOs to bring our programs forward. And then we got to the point a couple years ago where we were fairly happy with our external network, but our pipeline got to be robust enough. We were feeling confident in it. We were bringing products through various different clinical stages. We saw pivotal studies not too far off. And we had evolved our manufacturing platform. Initially, we started with adherent, like probably most gene therapy companies have, coming out of the academic labs, using hyperstacks, very manual, small batch processes. But we evolved our technology to suspension-based production, stirred tank reactors, and we felt like we had a new platform that was going to carry us for a number of years. So between the pipeline, having a manufacturing platform, and of course having enough capital, we decided to move ahead with plans to build our own internal GMP manufacturing. And we're deep into that process now. We're hoping to be making GMP batches in the first half of next year. And our full intention is that we'll continue to work with our external manufacturing network in a very complementary way. So we're getting to the point here within the next year where we're going to have sort of this hybrid model of insourcing and outsourcing to carry us forward, through pivotal studies and then, hopefully to commercialization as well.
And if you don't mind just touching a little further on that, when you decide to start bringing it in-house, obviously it's more than just building the facility. There's a lot of hiring, a lot of regulatory aspects that come with this. Do you mind just touching on what type of, what that decision looks like, not only from cost, but also schedule and then human capital as well?
Sure, yeah, a number of factors there. And I think, the biggest probably driving factor for us, it's kind of easy to categorize it this way. We really wanted to be able to control our own manufacturing destiny in the end, which kind of pushed us over and said, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. Absolutely, the capital's there, the equipment. You got to have the right subset of vendors to help you along the way. But I would say probably the biggest challenge in this area, and hearing Jim speak earlier, there is a lot of talent in the area, but there's not enough. So that was my sort of biggest worry going into this is, how do we attract the talent to the facility for manufacturing to really enable, not only getting the facility, the equipment online, but building all the GMP systems, putting the IT infrastructure in. And to do all that, it's a number of different functions, right? You've got to have the IT team there, you got to have the facilities team there, lots of engineers, validation folks, quality control, and then you bring on the manufacturing, almost kind of on the back end, train them up and get them ready to go. So, a combination of all those factors, really, really challenging for us. But it's exciting. It's exciting to see it all coming together. And on top of that, you had to deal with COVID. And maybe we'll get into this later, but one of the biggest risks that we have today is around materials. Can we get enough materials to actually commission our equipment?
Sure.
Material lead times are actually now, in some instances, longer than our equipment lead times to fabricate a new piece of equipment. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue, and I know they touched on that in the fireside chat as well. Is the facilities are becoming more and more flexible, but with that flexibility comes a lot of single-use equipment and materials that all have lead times attached to them. But I guess to jump over to you, Tom, just a question in regards to from your side of the fence, how are you guys also keeping up with these lead time demands, as well as that transition from what I would say is, if you go back to the historical, more sort of small molecule transactional based CMOs to today really being a partner to people like the Kite Pharmas and the Regenexx Bios of the world. How do you keep up with all of that and keep on the front end of the new technology and emerging technology that's out there?
Yeah, it's really hard to keep up with these guys. They're constantly on the edge. They keep us up all night just trying to keep up with them. But yeah, I mean, our story a little bit with Catalent cell and gene therapy. When I joined the company, we were Paragon Bioservices, and we were small. We were very modest size, but we happened to have sort of developed an ability to work with HEK293 cells, do transient transfections to produce, in this case, AAV, and it just happened to become a really hot field. So, and we were able to make it. We were able to focus, get our quality systems up, produce, and then that sort of built the business. But ever since that day, I feel like we have been sort of chasing the folks, say, at Kite and Regenexx, trying to keep up, because these are complex molecules to make, right? Producing an AAV is not easy. And what we also found, again, kind of getting into supply chain, that to be able to really effectively make these viral vectors, there were a lot of components that came into it. Kind of early on, one of the things that we realized was that, there was a increasing need for plasmid DNA, for example, as a raw material. Really critical anytime you're making, most of the time when you make something like AAV or lentiviral vectors, you're doing a transient transfection step with plasmid, right? And this is cGMP plasmid. And so we were finding kind of a bottleneck. We were finding that, we were ready to move in production. We didn't have a supply of plasmid. So, to try to keep up with these really accelerated timelines, we internalized that. So we had to spend a lot of time training, building capacity to have viral vector. The other thing that we also noticed was that a lot of our clients wanted to use the viral vectors to do the engineering of their cell therapies. And so, this was one of the things that, again, they were finding that they're, going to one CDMO for plasmid, another CDMO for viral vector, and then another CDMO, say, for their cell therapy manufacturing. So one of the things that we want to do, again, to try to keep up was let's internalize the ability to do the cell therapy manufacturing. And so, we ended up doing that through acquisitions. We thought about building internally, we decided to acquire. But then when you get into the cell therapy region, it's very similar that a rate limiting step, again, with raw material, in this case, was the viral vector. So what we've tried to do is try to integrate the ability to make the plasmid, to be able to use for the viral vector production, to be able to use for the cell therapy engineering. And in that way, the clients don't have to kind of independently qualify, contract, and track, 3 different CDMOs. So we try to make it a little bit more streamlined for the clients. And that's one thing. But the other thing, the part that to me is really fun, that does keep you up, is just trying to keep up with the innovations in the field, making sure we've got the right processes to be able to be able to scale up, to be able to get higher quality yields, to have better analytics. So it's I have to say it's a heck of a lot of fun to do, but it's definitely a full-time job to try to keep up. And I also want to say, so this is actually kind of fun because what we really want to do is work with the clients, and what we we're happy to work with a client as long as they need, right? We love, a lot of them will come to us, they're just kind of getting started up. It's ideal if they can sort of progress into Regenexx, where all right, we're off, we don't, they can wean themselves from a CDMO, they've learned enough, and now they can build internally. That's a success story for us as well, but there's some that may want to stay with you, and it becomes sort of a choice. We'll probably talk about that more, build your own contract out, and or do you do some sort of a hybrid approach where you have, a CDMO for excess capacity while you're doing internal. But all of those models work. I think they work well.
So along those same lines, I am curious, and it's, I guess, what I was asking Craig in regards to what he was looking for in a CMO. How often are you turning clients down? I mean, are there people that are coming to you and you're just saying, hey, we'd love to help you here, but this isn't the right fit here? Or just curious how you're evaluating things from your end as well.
Yeah, we hate to turn a client away, right? I mean, we really do. So, but it's difficult to get everything matched. So we are continuously building up more capacity. So that's sort of an ongoing approach so that we don't have to, tell a client it's 12 months. And I think one of the things that we've done that's really helped us is we've expanded and really invested in a lot of the early work, the process development, analytical development, because we can get started right away. And once you get started right away, then you have a little bit more flexibility of exactly when that sweet reservation will be. So I think, and the truth is, and I think you guys will certainly admit, some people, when they're ready, they are ready. Some companies, when they're ready, they're not quite ready. They're less ready, I think. So so it works pretty much by both being able to get them in and doing all that initial development, and while in the back continue to expand kind of our clinical GMP, we minimize the amount of clients that we would have to turn away or delay. But still, it's an everyday scheduling and hurdle that you have to work on.
Great. Well, Harish, not going to let you sit there silently here. Question for you as we're talking about the build aspect, and if it sounds like from what I heard from the fireside chat, as long as you have an Alexis on your team, you're good to go. But I'm sure it's not that easy, and I wanted to maybe if you can just talk about where you're at right now with the Frederick facility and some of the hurdles that you're having along the way as well.
No, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So thanks for having me here. So I'm looking at this. There's pros and cons of insourcing versus outsourcing. That's the topic, right? So I think like what we have said so far is the two things that we mentioned here. One is the platform, and the other is the pipeline. Yeah. And those are two things, and we need to go back to that. Right? Those are two P's that are very critical to making these decisions on whether to in-source and build, or whether to outsource. And I'm going to give you a story, guys. So, this is about late 1990s. I don't want to say how old I am, but late 1990s, my first job in biologics manufacturing, it was a cell culture product, and about $500 million was invested in a facility, and the product did not take off. Mm-hmm. Okay, there was no pipeline, and there was no platform.
Right, one product.
One product, no platform. You build a facility for the product did not take off. Mothballed the facility, $500 million. Fast forward 20 years later, and I'm sure everybody knows about this, maybe the most, maybe the product which will be the biggest selling product in the history of biologics. Started off with outsourcing. Okay, did not have the capability to manufacture, and there's always a risk of whether you will short the market. Mm-hmm. So that's the other extreme. When you go outsource, you're dependent on the suppliers, on the contract manufacturers. You don't have an internal facility for it, and then you're really worried on a quarter by quarter whether you'll be able to produce the product. So these are two different extremes, right? And I think I'm going to fast forward a little bit and see where we are currently with Kite. Coming back to your original question, right? So it's very important. I think Craig mentioned this very well about the platform and the pipeline. So every company, right? When they start off, they always start off saying, "Hey, we don't want to invest the capital, and we first want to see whether this product will take off or not." The second most important thing is to say, "Hey, where is your R&D? Do you have something behind it? Do you have a pipeline that actually goes behind it?" And it's not enough to have a pipeline. You need to have a pipeline with a platform, mm-hmm. Right? So that's what we have done, I think, very well. I think we talk about Jim talking previously, and Alexis building this facility for us. Our facility is such that we can not only produce our two commercial products that we have currently, but we have the capability of bringing in new products from our robust pipeline with similar or different technology and be able to swap out or be able to use the current technology to manufacture that pipeline. That's very critical. We can't be investing $200, $300 million for every product that we bring in. So I think that is the key piece of the puzzle here, Ben, is being able to devise that pipeline and be able to bring it in-house and still be able to use our current manufacturing facilities to make it. So I think that is key. I think Kite has done a fantastic job with it, and we hope that our Frederick facility will be our launch facility for many products to come in the future.
Sure. Do you mind touching a little bit more on, I guess, the Kite network, if you will, in regards to you have the Frederick facility, but you mentioned, it was mentioned in the fireside chat, the multiple facilities, and then how that also impacts these various decisions with key partners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Tom will appreciate this as well. I think what a lot of companies do, and I think this is what Lilly did in the early 2000s, is you launch out of your clinical manufacturing facility as well. So you either go to a CMO, you go to the CMO, or you say, hey, I'm going to launch this sort of a clinical manufacturing facility and see how it takes off. And if it takes off well, then you start investing in something, provided you have something to back it up as well. So, I mean, as far as Kite goes, I mean, we have a clinical manufacturing facility in the West Coast in California. We launched our commercial product out of a clinical manufacturing facility. Then we invested in our own manufacturing facility in California. The product, of course, has grown very robustly, and we have a second product to back it up, and we have a pipeline to come behind it. And as everybody knows, as Jim mentioned, in cell therapy, it's very important to stay close to the patient, right? I mean, so you have patients in the West Coast geographically. You know, it's not like making API and shipping it frozen or liquid or wherever throughout the world. It's like, hey, you have to be close to the patient, you have to be close to the airport. We invested in a facility in California, went ahead, invested in a facility near the Amsterdam airport for the EU patients, so they can avail of our technologies. And then finally, we invested in our own facility here in the East Coast again. Geographically, if you look at it, we are somewhere between the time zones of EU and the West Coast. This is actually a perfect spot for us, not only to serve the East Coast patients, but also potentially in the future to be able to take workload off our West Coast facility and our EU facility whenever we get approvals across geographies. So I think that's our network right now. We have a facility that we can potentially launch out of. For clinical supply, we have 3 manufacturing facilities, like Jim alluded to, enough not only to supply our 2 commercial products, but hopefully in the future come in with future pipeline molecules as well.
So on that note, and what you were hitting on there with the geographical location and being close to the patients, I'm sure that that's something that you're looking at from your side. I'm sure that the CMOs are doing the same. What does that look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Are these facilities going to be all over the place? Are you going to keep adding them? Or is it going to work with just, you know, the way that you have it set up now with the locations they're at?
So that depends on the technology that comes in, right? So in autologous technology, yes, we are depending on the AIF coming in. We are dependent on the patient. Each patient is a lot. Hopefully with allogeneic and other technologies coming in, we might be a little more self-sufficient here, where we can say, hey, we will access some things from cell banks and so on in order to produce a therapy for the patient. So depending on how the technology goes is one aspect. Irrespective, for our commercial products, which are autologous products, hey, if you're going to expand tomorrow to new geographies, Asia Pacific regions and so on, we got to start looking at, potentially, are we going to look at using processes that we can freeze the AIF and be able to use it in other sites so that we can be able to transport this frozen and be able to produce the product for the patient. Or we might have to open up new facilities geographically to be able to access patients in those areas. So those are, I think, business decisions that have to be made by companies as they bring in commercial products down the line.
Sure. And I guess, again, from the CMO standpoint, I mean, if you're evaluating those business decisions in-house, and I'm sure you guys are looking at the same for the future of where this is all going, how does that play into your decision process?
I mean, I think it's the same thing. I mean, you know, right now, if we look at our client base, we're probably 60% autologous, 40% allogeneic. I mean, we don't know for sure, but we think the allogeneic field is going to grow a little bit faster. So a lot of our investments right now are in the allogeneic field, scaling up. So in that case, we don't have to be, proximal to the patient. But at the same time, We also know that that is 60% of our business, so we're working on, better closed systems for manufacturing autologous. We do have sites in Europe. We have site in the U.S., and we're looking at building East Coast, West Coast. So we have that in mind for autologous, but, I think, as the research progresses, we'll see more and more allogeneic. We're also doing an investment, a little bit more kind of a research side on iPSC, so inducible progenitor stem cells. So we've kind of brought that into our portfolio, working on making some, universal PSD, GMP cell banks, and looking at ways to produce allogeneic iPSCs as a source for many of our cell types for starting material for our cell therapy. So again, autologous, yeah, we are looking at distinct regions. Allogeneic, more investing on scale up, and then future looking at iPSCs as an additional source of input cells. So it's kind of our three-pronged strategy.
Okay, and I guess coming back to you,
Okay.
Greg. I was going to challenge Tom just on something. Okay, please.
Is that okay?
Challenge away. Yes.
I just wanted to pick
makes it fun.
up on something you were talking about earlier, Tom, because I'll start with kind of some of my experience with CMOs who have sort of grown through acquisition and build, and sort of globally, a lot of different regions. And it's great. I mean, it's great to see a CMO have multiple capabilities. Yeah. Where I've run into trouble is every site kind of behaves differently, and they treat clients a little bit differently. And so sometimes it doesn't always feel like a connected network. So I'm curious how you think about that, and how does Catalent think about that for serving clients?
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. It is difficult, and especially, over the last 18 months in COVID. I mean, when you do an acquisition, you want to be there on site. You want to spend as much time as possible. So we have grown a lot during this period, and we have suffered a bit because, if you're not there sitting across from the table, going out to dinner, really bonding with your group, it's hard to make those connections. So, we tried our best, probably just like everybody here, daily, Zoom calls, etc. It just doesn't replace kind of being there on the ground. So, yeah, I think there's no question that that's a challenge, because you do want to have, it's just, and you hear this all the time, and it drives me crazy, but, we're one company. And for a client, you're Baltimore, you're Houston, you're Catalent, right? So we should be speaking kind of in one voice, one uniform quality systems. That is our goal. We talk about it every day. It's difficult, but it's certainly a major, goal of ours. Yeah. So it shouldn't make a difference who you're talking to or working with. But.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it sounds like, it's you want Coke to taste the same everywhere, right? When they're making the Coca-Cola, but. I'd be curious to know, as far as coming from that side, again, the CMO and the steps that you take there, and the folks that you're hiring. Obviously, it's a little bit different as well in regards to, you have a lot of different clients with a lot of different technologies coming in and out, and how you keep up with the hiring demands as a CMO versus these guys that have specific products that might lure people in. What's the sell or the pitch to the talent that's coming your way?
Yeah, I think there are folks that want to work in a product company, and then there's folks that may want to work in a service company. Even though on a day-to-day basis you're kind of doing the same thing, it is a different environment, right? When you're working at a product company, you get to focus a bit more. Service, you're a little bit, you could be working with 6, 7 different clients. But what we try to do is, sort of site specific, right? So, we'll have this site is focusing on, say, viral vectors. And so when you kind of, go out and recruit and hire, those folks know that's what they're going to be working on at that site. If we're at another site, we're doing plasmid fermentation, we're hiring for that. Because you really can't, people, you want to provide these broad services, but you also have to be focused. You got to be really good at what you do. So we don't expect our people to be good in cell and plasmid and vector. So site specific, we hire people for those jobs. Now, if people want to grow with the company and diversify and move to another site, that's fine. But we do try to focus it at the site so that we're sure that we're getting the best and they're providing the best service.
Just a reminder, if anybody has questions, please don't be shy out there. Step up to the mic. We've got a lot of experience up here and would love to take some questions. I do have another one that comes to mind in regards to, I guess we've seen more partnerships with Big Pharma during COVID than in the past as far as people helping each other out and lending facilities and things like that. I'm curious, with the shortage and the supply chain and the issues that we're having there, are people extending the olive branch? Does it just become more competitive? Are people helping each other out? Is it all about who you know at running what facility to ask for some help? I'd love to hear some stories on that as well. I'll pick on you first, Craig.
I mean, I'll start, and it's probably not the most successful stories, but yeah, I mean, we do have, I'll say we have a network of, a few, not a dozen, but a few companies like us doing gene therapy that we have relationships with, and from time to time, I'll get an email and say, hey, we're short on this material, or we're short on this, or we're missing this filter, and that type of thing. And we scramble, we try to do the best we can to see if we've got something in inventory that could actually help somebody else out. I say it's not a successful story because I haven't found many instances where we have like-for-like materials that are that easy to move along, but we would certainly do it if we had it and we could help somebody out, because it might be us next time that's calling out, trying to find a material to help somebody else out. But I would say in general, we're keeping our supply chain people really busy. And I spent a lot of time in supply chain, a number of years in supply chain, and usually you don't get attention until you run short of a material. Well, right now they're getting all kinds of attention and we're giving them as much help as we possibly can, and having that supply chain expertise to be really thoughtful about how we get out there and find materials that might have fallen off of the back of the truck and repurpose them for what we want to do. It's critical. It's critical. I mean, it's just the environment right now is it's just crazy when it comes to getting the materials you need, like you mentioned before, especially with these single-use facilities that we're operating.
I agree with you 100%, Craig. I mean, this is what we have seen in the last 12 months is something we have not seen in the past, right? I mean, especially you guys mentioned single-use systems and utilizing this for commercial manufacturing products and being able to work with our vendors. And I think, like you said, Craig, just like we have Alexis for our capital projects, we have a phenomenal supply chain team as well. Yeah. And they've been really busy working. And to your point, Ben, the relationships with our vendors, to be able to work with them, to be able to work in advance and say, hey, this is a problem we're going to face 2 months down the line. How can we help you ship this out to us so that we don't face a shortage? And I think that relationship has worked really well with some of our vendors and stepping in at the highest levels. So it's not just supply chain on site. It is at the highest level at Kite, being able to work at that level with our vendors to be able to say, hey, this is what we see, this is what we forecast, how can you help us deliver these in time to be able to meet our demands? So I think it's been a phenomenal experience, and to be honest, I think all our vendors have stepped up and been able to deliver.
And I guess that is, again, one of the risks of bringing it in-house. All of a sudden, that's on you and your supply chain team, not the CMOs. And I'm sure neither are easy in regards to the stress levels of staying up at night worrying about your own materials or worrying about those of the folks that you're partnering with. But
yeah, no, that's definitely true. And our strategy, even for outsourcing, has been that we've always supplied the higher value, sort of longer lead time type of materials to our CMOs. But as you said, now with our internal manufacturing, now we have to source all the components and plastics, whereas our CMOs were doing that in the past. So that's another huge lift for bringing that online for a new factory.
So another question for you, Tom. Are you seeing, when it comes to big pharma and their capabilities, are they starting to even shop out some of their own processes to CMOs as far as competing their in-house manufacturing teams against yours? And how often are you seeing that? And is that an industry trend now?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a trend, but we've definitely seen it. We see it all the time, and I saw it with my previous site too. I think, and I can't speak for large pharma, but I think they have, they have priority projects that will probably be done in-house, and they've got maybe just below the highest priority that they outsource. So I would say a good part of our business is working with large pharma on some pretty exciting projects. Is it increasing? It's always hard to say because we're growing also. So maybe we're a little bit more in their wheelhouse or so. But we do get a lot of business, and they usually tend to be really interesting, exciting projects. So we definitely see it. Great. And I would say that, it is, I'm back on the supply chain, but, I think it used to be in the companies. I think it used to be like when our salesperson would come in the room, they may get an applause because they made a great new sale, and the clean rooms are going to be busy for a couple of months, or, maybe one of the high-level presidents of the company. Now it's when the supply chain people come in because they found a source of something. It's a standing ovation. They're the all-stars now. It's kind of like if you're new to the business, you'd be like, that's where I want to go. I want to be in supply chain.
It's never been like that before.
It's just, and you just realize how unbelievably important that is. And when you have a run for a critical client that's got this trial they have to do, and you're out of a filter, it is, it's just that one component. But without that, you cannot run that. And that's when I have seen companies, I don't care for your competitors or anything, we do have a nice kind of communication group, and we have been able to find these missing items from what we would call a competitor. But in this time, I think everybody is stepping up and working together. So it's been, and what a relief. And then you think so highly of that company that you want to help them. So, and then when they have the same problem, you're more than happy to scour your warehouse to find that component for them. So it's been a really interesting 18 months, I'd say.
Awesome. It looks like we got our first question coming in here.
The online attendees, you mentioned building facilities. Who did the construction?
You guys mind sharing that? Going down I think all three of you have new facilities that were just recently.
Sure. Yeah, I can start. I mean, for our new facility, I'll describe it real quickly because it's a bit unique from a manufacturing perspective, at least unique to me. Our new facility that's going up is our headquarter facility, where we've basically brought 90% of our different functions into one facility. It's a 5-story building. Manufacturing is the top floor. So below us, we have all of our process development laboratories. Below that, we have all of our research laboratories. And then the corporate office space is there as well. So a little bit different with having manufacturing on the top floor. Specifically, so the base building was constructed by Winning Turner, and the interior fit out is being constructed by DPR.
Alexis, do you want to answer that question? Do you mind? You know a lot more than I do. Coakley Williams. Thanks.
Yeah, and I should know the answer to that question, but I don't, and I don't want to misspeak. But I do know that we've used multiple builders because we'll have multiple projects ongoing, and so we try to get different groups involved so that we're not diluting their efforts. But if somebody's interested, it's not confidential. I could certainly find all that information out.
Can I extend on mine too, because that's the construction component. We used Ewing Cole as the design firm. So the architecture and design firm.
Yeah, and Tom, I'll give a personal plug here. We did one of your most recent buildings at the BWI Airport facility.
I should know that. I should know that,
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. Well, thank you for the excellent discussion. So it's tapping on keeping up, like you mentioned before, with science, with new innovation, science and technology evolving every day. Keeping up means that you might have to change the direction, from the original plan that you might have, and it's like a constant struggle and a competition. Would you mind sharing some experience where you thought you might have to change the direction and, what you went through, and what was the mindset at the time?
Oh, wow. Good question. You want me to start, or go ahead?
I can start. And this is actually, technology, like you said, changes. And from the time you start a project, it takes, a couple of years to build a facility, and by the time your facility is built, the technology has changed. So this is a common problem. I think you bring up a good point, and I think that the way to handle that in many cases is like I said, keep it as flexible as possible, right? To be able to bring in the technology that is currently viable, and of course be able to deliver that therapy to the patient at the most reasonable cost of goods, and be able to produce the best quality and so on is of prime importance. So we need to be able to build that facility, keep it flexible, in order to adapt to any technology that comes up, and be able to bring that technology at a very fast rate. And what happens many times is we talk about technology transfer. So the technology transfer is happening as the technology is being developed. So that not only, it sounds like it is you're doing, you're doing multiple things at one time. Usually in the old paradigm, you develop the technology, you build a site, then you do the technology transfer, and all that takes time. So in order to compress that timeline, you're saying, hey, we are developing this technology, but we're going to do the tech transfer at the same time. We keep our facilities flexible in order to adapt to any technology we develop, and thereby shorten the timeline and be able to deliver the therapy to the patient.
Yeah, let me talk about it in the context, because I mentioned we talked a little bit about platform processes, which I'm a real believer in platform processes. But admittedly, there's no such thing really as a stagnant platform. It's constantly evolving, and you have to acknowledge that most definitely. Although at a higher level, you say you're gonna build and design a facility around a general platform, and then have the flexibility to be able to bring in new technologies that still utilize that base process platform. I guess the other components that extend beyond just the facility and the equipment, and from a technology standpoint, is making sure you've got really robust comparability plans if you're moving from one process to the next on a single program. And having that collaboration with the regulatory folks is just so important, so that you don't have to go back and do additional clinical studies or additional bridging studies that get very complex, very expensive, and time consuming. So you got to be really thoughtful. We talk about having a process platform and a disciplined approach for bringing on next generation processes against that platform. So it's a never-ending, I'll tell you, it's a never-ending discussion we have is, when do you make a change? When do you hold back a change? When do you try to bundle changes? Everybody wants to bundle changes, but when you do that, you usually have to wait a while to get some of your changes in. So you got to counterweight. What's the impact of the change? What's the benefit am I getting? What's the risk that I'm taking? And then decide, is the time right to go ahead and make that change, invest in some new equipment or technology? Is it going to fit the plant? Hopefully so. And if not, then you got to adjust along the way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, especially as a CDMO where, every client has a slightly different product, we just start, with the idea of really what's common amongst all the different platforms that we might use. And then we make sure that we kind of design it to that. But flexibility, it has to be flexible. And the other thing that we spent a lot of time with, and this was a little bit painful, to get our ops group, our quality group, our reg group at sites in the US and the Europe to all agree on a common set of facility, parameters. grades of your clean rooms, unidirectional, bidirectional, all of your flows. Get a common, get the whole company on the same page, and then think about all the potential processes, what's common, and build it such that you do have the flexibility to kind of move with whatever client comes in. That's not easy to do, and sometimes you end up over-investing or over-engineering a particular room. You can certainly run it at a more relaxed condition, but at least you have the flexibility to use that for whatever product you may have to manufacture.
Yeah, and I will put in a plug here. I mean, we talk about supply chain issues, and in particular with single-use technologies. This is one advantage to single-use technologies, that being able to swap out a piece of equipment is much easier than if you've built a traditional stainless steel factory where you're ripping miles of pipe out because you've got a new technology that you want to bring in. I'm not saying it's easy, but usually it's a bit faster and maybe less disruptive to the facility itself when you're just having to wheel out a piece of equipment and bring another one in, and getting the right kit to be able to run it from a single-use system perspective.
Looks like we've got time for one more question.
Yep.
Oh. There it is.
Hello. Okay, so as I said before, I'm a student, so I'm not exactly familiar with the biomanufacturing process, but going back to the supply and demand issue that you talked about earlier, so do you think that the lack of raw materials, is that maybe it has something to do with the vendors, and if that's an issue from international sources versus with the sources within the U.S.? So I understand that with COVID there's been a demand in general, a surge for supply, but would international sources make a difference in that? Thank you.
It's a good question. I'll start and then you guys can add to it. I'm going to oversimplify it. I realize this is an oversimplification, but COVID vaccine manufacturing uses a lot of the same technology, a lot of the same materials that I use to make a gene therapy product. And you know what? If you're making a COVID vaccine, you're jumping the line with vendors. And I'll say this, as much as it pains me, that's good. I would rather have materials go into COVID vaccines, saving lives today, and dealing with the consequences of them kind of jumping in front of us. The other component to it is, there are labor shortages that are impacting vendors. So maybe the output over the last year and a half hasn't been as strong as it has been. So I think it's a combination of those things. Internationally, I'm not sure I could totally speak to it, but most of our supply chains are pretty global. A lot of steel that we bring in is from China. You bring plastics from all over the place. Plastics is a big problem right now. So it could be part of the solution, is tapping more into the international community. But it's really getting the base suppliers kind of up and running and capable to get those base raw materials out faster.
And I agree. I mean, it's a great question. It is global. That's kind of the first thing you start to look at is, you're always looking for alternate, backup suppliers, but it's hit really all across, any biomanufacturer, pretty much any site, we're seeing the same thing. And it's difficult, but I agree. We've prioritized this and it's good and it's working. We're getting, vaccines made, and, hopefully, this we can improve the supply and we can not miss, dates and timelines moving forward.
Yeah. My hope is ultimately this will make the industry stronger in the end. After we get through this bolus of COVID and COVID vaccine, there'll be a lot of new capacity brought on for these materials.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Supply chain job's going to become really, really easy in a couple years.
Come full circle. Well, I think it's about time here. I wanted to thank you guys for really making this a great conversation, great panel. I think there was also a lot of great questions here from the audience, and great topic at hand. Very exciting to see how it's just taking effect here in our local biohealth capital region with just the amount of growth and the amount of folks that are starting to grow their own manufacturing capabilities, and then the CMOs having an even larger presence in this area. So a lot of exciting things. And lastly, just want to thank Maryland Life Sciences and the Tech Council for having us up here today. So thank you all.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
This year's Maryland Life Sciences Bio-Innovation Conference is sponsored by Avantor. From breakthrough discovery to agile delivery of mission-critical products and services, Avantor is a trusted global partner to customers in the life sciences and advanced technologies and applied materials industries. Our leading global customer channel, VWR, offers an integrated, seamless purchasing experience. For more than 23 years, we have collaborated with BioBusiness Solutions to play a critical role in helping members develop scientific breakthroughs. We set science in motion to create a better world. The Maryland Department of Commerce. Welcome to Maryland, where day by day, dreamers are becoming doers, makers, and pioneers of the future. And while the state's code breakers, vaccine makers, and next-gen manufacturers are pioneering our future, they're doing it in a place that's best for their future. Make a move to Maryland to take advantage of our natural business assets, boundless resources, and amazing quality of life. The Montgomery County Office of Economic Development. Commercialize your science near the world's top scientists at NIH and FDA. Connect with us at thinkmoco.com to find your success in Montgomery County, Maryland, the immunology capital next to the nation's capital. And the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. Pharma represents the country's leading innovative biopharmaceutical research companies, which are devoted to discovering and developing medicines that enable patients to live longer, healthier, and more productive lives. Since 2000, Pharma member companies have invested more than $1 trillion in the search for new treatments and cures, including $91.1 billion in 2020 alone. We'd like to thank these and all of our sponsors for their support of this year's Maryland Life Sciences Bio-Innovation Conference.